time, so much opportunity in front of us. So today what we're going to do is just dive right in a little bit. Gosh, it's been a while since I've hosted a Monday national call, and I love this call slot because everybody is just in the thick of it right now. Either you've been making dials this morning, you've got a couple of appointments lined up for this afternoon. So my goal is to just give you guys some valuable takeaways that you guys can apply today, this minute, in your business and even in your life, but especially that you can apply today in your business as we go out there, protect a bunch of families, and therefore protect our own. So what we're going to be talking about today are quality questions, specifically for parts of a real script. So if you're brand new to the call, the real script, rapport, emotion, assumption, and locking it down. We'll repeat that many times in the next few minutes. But looking at that in-home, I still call it in-home, but really that virtual sales presentation that we do to help clients identify their need and cover that family. So I was thinking about some takeaways for this call. And, you know, right now we know that connection is more important than ever, right? I'm an extrovert. I am just starving for some connection. So much so that I took a road trip around the country for the past 6 weeks just to see some people. And we know that connection is more important than ever, but we also know that it's harder potentially to accomplish that connection in a virtual sales environment. So like right now, you may be on this call feeling like it's just really hard for you to connect to clients. You may be on this call and you can't seem to find the need that your clients may have. You may be having trouble building some of that connection, finding that need. Maybe you're on the call because right now your policies just aren't sticking, right? You're doing the work, you're helping the families, but those policies are falling off the books. I could think of a million different reasons why what I hope that this information will deliver can be valuable to really anybody at any stage in the business. So, you know, one of my favorite topics to train on is the topic around asking quality questions. And, you know, I could spend the entire time just talking about the importance of asking quality questions, but there's 3 takeaways that I want everybody to get from this call today. And I hope that you're in a place where you can take some notes because, again, I'm going to be giving you some very simple, very actionable, very direct questions that you can be asking today to help improve your sales presentation. So the 3 takeaways that I want for this time together, I want us all to know and to understand that it takes emotional labor to do our job well, especially to ask quality questions. So takeaway number 1, it takes emotional labor to do what we do well. The second takeaway that I want everybody to get out of today is like, how can we be more curious, right? Let's be curious right now. That's our second takeaway. The third takeaway is going to be the importance of how and those other W's that we use, the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, and why. It's going to be the importance of those 5 W's to create that really like that connection with your client, okay? So those are our 3 takeaways. Let's dive right in. As a child, I just hated to be told no, you guys. I just hated to be told no. And, I guess most of us are that way. And I think there's some really sad statistic about how most of us as kids hear the word no way more than we hear the word yes as we're growing up. And I hated to be told no. And it wasn't until years later, as I'm doing this personal work and self-development work and leadership work through Symmetry, that I started to recognize, like, wow, at an early age, I was kind of training for sales. Because if you think about throughout our lifetime, the difference between quality questions and not so quality questions, it can really show us, like, imagine what we can learn by just being curious as parents, as partners in a relationship or a marriage, in business, in sales with our clients. Like, think about the impact that a quality question can have versus one that's not. And I love to give the example of like when we're little. And, my mom asked me, did you throw your little brother's Tonka toy in the lake? And of course, like, it's a closed-ended question. There's only one of 2 answers that my mom's going to get from me. And so I'm going to shake my head. I'm going to say, no, Mom, I definitely didn't do that. That's just the nature of us as kids. We're like, no way. Did you stick the gum under the desk at school? No, absolutely not. But if my mom at that time had known about quality questions and had shaped her questions a little differently, she might have asked, Cicily, why did you throw your little brother's Tonka toy in the lake? At which point, her being curious, she would have learned a lot more about the situation, because I would have told her that moments before he ripped the head off of my Barbie. Right, so that's just a small example as when we're children about like quality questions versus yes, no. How does that translate to us now as grown-ups and in a sales environment or in our relationships? It's like with our clients, it goes to that takeaway of being curious. And when we look at our real system, we've got, again, rapport, emotion, assumption, and locking it down. These are the 4 sort of steps or a pathway that we're going down when we're sitting in front of clients, whether that's on Zoom or in person. So what I want to do for us is I want to start with the rapport. And for each section, I'm just going to give us 2 quality questions that you guys can walk away with today. Now, granted, each of these sections has many, many, many quality questions, but I'm just going to give you 2 for each today so that you can go out and apply it and just learn the practice of like starting to be aware of how you're asking these questions. So, and we'll get into emotional labor and how this weaves through everything. So with rapport, you know, guys, back in the day when we were going into people's homes, rapport came a little more naturally because we could see their space. We could see the pictures on the wall and discuss the knickknacks, and we could, you know, see the game was on television and strike up. And it's harder to do that when we're just in front of a computer screen. So now more than ever, how is it that we build rapport with quality questions during this very first phase of our in-home or our sales process? So this is where I think I'm going to make a quick plug for the importance of having a solid role and purpose that you have memorized before you go into every presentation. There's audios and trainings on that, but the role and purpose, this is really where I personally am able to start building rapport, even though it may not be the rapport that you're traditionally thinking about, like the rapport of, you know, asking about the pictures or the cats or the, you know, whatever the case may be. I'm able to, even long before we couldn't go into homes, I was able to weave rapport into that role and purpose. So I want to make sure that you guys have a solid kind of statement of purpose that you do every single time for every single presentation, because during that role and purpose and during that rapport phase, that's where I'm going to kind of get out what I call the surface why. So let's talk about some quality questions to get out that surface why, because when I'm building rapport, I'm not going straight for the most emotional aspect of my presentation, right? I want them to trust me. I want them to know that I'm someone who's here to listen. And the best way I can do that right out of the gate, guys, is to be curious. Okay, so a couple of questions for the rapport section. They may seem simple, but I'll flesh them out a little bit. So the first question is a how question. How long have you guys been thinking about mortgage protection? Or you might insert, how long have you guys been thinking about life insurance? This does so much because it gets us on the same page and helps us kind of get a timeline for how urgent this may or may not be for them. So that's one of my favorite questions. How long have you guys been thinking about this? The second awesome question that I love in the rapport section that's a quality question is, who do you know that has a story around this kind of life insurance? You know, maybe they had it, maybe they didn't have it. Who do you know that's experienced either the benefits or the downsides of not having this kind of protection? Because I'll tell you this, guys, everybody has a story. Everybody has the neighbor who lost the spouse, who had to foreclose. Everybody has the friend who lost the job, especially now. Like, everybody has a story. And if I can be curious about that story, I can make that connection with the client. So again, just those 2, how long have you guys been thinking about this kind of mortgage protection or life insurance, whatever you're comfortable saying there? And who do you know that has a story around this? I'll give you one more for rapport just because I couldn't help but writing it down. I feel so strongly about it. But like, the other one is a what. The last one is a what question. What motivated you to fill out this letter? You know, it's kind of playing into the first question a little bit. So those are a couple that I hope that you guys can use during that section, because again, what it's going to do right out of the gate, you're curious. It is going to get that surface why on the table so that then you know where to dig in a little bit later. And those are my 2 favorite reasons for those. So let's go on to the emotion section of our in-home presentation, right? And so This is where, for sure, guys, that first takeaway comes into play with the emotional labor. Because what I want you guys to recognize is that you may even be on this call right now and you're 6 months into this business. And you may be noticing that you're still able to make sales, but for some reason your APV is lower than what it was when you first got started. Or maybe you're even in like that 6-month funk that we all go through, I promise, where like after 6 months, like my production actually started to dip and I'm like, what's wrong with me? Am I losing it? What's going on? Like, do I not have my edge anymore? All goes back to this emotional labor. So the aspects in which in our life we're filling up our own emotional buckets at home, and that's going to play into what we do in our business. And what I have found is that when I'm not making connections with clients, when my policies are falling off the books, when I'm getting a think about it way too far into my sales process, or I'm getting objections like all the way at the end, what I found for me is that I was being emotionally lazy. And what I mean by that, guys, is that like we get to a point in the business or in the day, even after we're running 7, 8 appointments, where it's hard to want to keep digging in on these kinds of questions because quality questions require emotional labor. So speaking of that, in the emotion section of our script, I love the emotional section of my presentation because I let numbers do all the heavy lifting for me here. I get a little bit of an emotional break during this part because I love numbers, and numbers for me, in my opinion, create emotion. What do I mean by that? Many of us use a needs analysis. Some of us call it a fire drill. This is a part in the presentation where I'm going to find out if they have a need, what that need looks like, how is that going to make them feel. Here are the questions, a couple of them at least, that I use to allow money to create emotion. Now, we're assuming at this point, guys, with these questions, that I've already started doing a little bit of a quick budget with my family over the Zoom presentation to find out what's in place. So here are the questions that I love. What do you already have in place that would pass on to blank, pass on to your spouse? What do you already have in place that would pass on to Mary today if you died, Bob? Like savings, 401ks, insurance. What do you already have in place that would pass on to Mary today if you died? Powerful question for a couple of reasons, guys, because as you're going to see with all of the amazing things that are rolling out in the Symmetry system, this is the easiest way for us to start getting into some of those financial questions that some of us are hesitant to ask. This is how I begin my fire drill, my needs analysis. Because it's a very simple and innocent and non-harsh question. What do you already have in place? Let's start with that. Why is that question so important? Because I've already told Bob and Mary during my role and purpose, I've already told them that the reason I'm going to be asking some tough questions today is to see if this is something you even need, right? Because not everybody needs it. And if you don't, I'm not going to be here trying to tell you something you don't need. So I've already told them that in my role and purpose. So now when I ask questions like, what do you already have in place? It's not a big deal. But if I didn't ask that in a quality way, I could just get a yes, no answer, and then I would be shut down. So here's how that would sound. Do you guys already have some stuff in place that Mary will be okay when you go? Well, of course, any let's say it is a male, female, any male in the household, his ego is not going to allow him to say, oh yeah, we're screwed. He's going to say, oh yeah, she'll be fine. Because I've asked a yes, no question. So if I'm curious and I say, what do you already have in place? Boom, now things start to open up. So that's my favorite question on the emotion section of our in-home. Second question for a takeaway today, guys, is what would Mary have to do to maintain this lifestyle when you die? What would Mary have to do to maintain this lifestyle when you die? Now, there's a couple of things I want to point out. A symbol full of boldness, as Casey talks about it. I want you guys to notice some of my language with both of these sections so far. I'm not sugarcoating or dancing around this subject. I'm not saying if something happens to you, what's already in place. I'm not saying, if you pass, what would Mary have to do? I'm saying when, because it's inevitable, guys. It happens to all of us. So that's just another little side note, quality W, is I'm saying when this happens, not if, right? So just to repeat those for the emotion section, what do you already have in place that's going to pass on to Mary today if you died? Like savings, insurance, 401ks, and then I'm just going to put my head down and start typing on my computer. I'm going to start writing. I'm putting my head down. I'm listening for their responses. Secondly, what would Mary have to do to maintain this lifestyle, this one that you guys have today while you're both living? What would she have to do when you pass? And again, guys, just to point out for that section, money is a great way to create emotion, because I promise you, I've never gone through a fire drill in the end when there's two numbers on the bottom of the page. The first number is like what they have together while they're living that comes in every month. The second number is what Mary's going to have when he's dead. I have never seen a family where those two numbers were put side by side and they had a need where there wasn't emotion that was instantly created by those numbers. So don't shy away from a fire drill, even if you are a story-based salesperson. Let numbers do the heavy lifting for you, okay? Let's move on to the third section of our sales presentation, and that is assumption. And there's a couple of things, guys, that I'm going to assume here about assumption, which is that all of the objections that you may have gotten in your presentation should have already been gotten out of the way with your role and purpose. If you're to the assumption part of your presentation and you're still getting objections, then we need to go back and look at your role and purpose, because it's designed so that any pushback that you're going to get from a client should really happen in the first 15 minutes that you're on with them. We should not be an hour into a presentation getting those. So I'm going to assume that those have been already taken out of the way. I'm also going to assume in this section, guys, that features and benefits should have already been explained. You know, however it is that you sell, if you're a features and benefits person, we do it through value add. But by the time I am in the assumption phase and I'm getting ready to show numbers, anything that we were going to talk about in terms of what this policy does, what it is, any questions or concerns they have about the concepts we've explained, those should have already been explained and out of the way, because once the numbers come on the table, which they do during the assumption section, once those numbers are on the table, we're done. Everything after that is transactional. So if we have relational things that have to be taken care of, we're going to assume that that's already happened before we get to this part. Fair? The other thing that I'm going to assume, guys, for all of us, is that at this point in the presentation, we have a very clear picture of what their exact need is and if they even have one. And this is where I just want to put a little cultural plug for the kind of sales process that we follow here at Symmetry, because there are plenty of people out there in this industry giving salespeople a bad rap because they're selling people things that they don't need. And what we do here at Symmetry is that we make sure that there is a need to solve. We don't create a need for people. All right, so I'm going to assume that we have a clear picture at this point and that there is a need, or at least that they know that they're getting ready to pay for a luxury because there's not a need. All right, so here are my questions for assumption. We've gone through the features and benefits. We've outlined that there's a need. We've explained the different types of mortgage protection. And now I've put numbers on the table, probably 3 of them based on the way most of us present our options. Here's my question. How close is one of these options to fitting your needs and budget? How close? How close is one of these options? Okay, how close is one of these options for fitting your needs and budget? Here's an interesting question I'm going to give to you guys for my second one. And I hope you take this the right way, because it's bold to be able to ask this question, but I'm doing it for a reason. My next question is, why did you not go with the lower payment option? Why didn't you go with the lower payment option? Now, there's some of you right now on the call that are like, she is crazy. I would never ask that question. You know, there's some of us when we're brand new, they say they want the higher option. We've got that app filled out. We're skidding out of the driveway or getting off of the Zoom call, and we're not asking any questions about it. But I would challenge you, if you're confident enough that they had a need and you're confident enough in your connection, You should not be afraid to ask this question. Why didn't you go with a lower option? Have your client sell you on the option that they have chosen using quality questions. Okay. So again, how close is one of these options to fitting, and why did you not go with one of these lower ones? Assuming, of course, that they didn't just go with the lowest one. Now, locking it down. Last section. How are we doing on time here? Oh, we're doing great. 12:21. This is going to be on point, on fire. Have you guys off of here by 12:30 for sure. The lock it down section. Here is where it is so easy, and it was for me. It's so easy for me to overlook this part of our real system. Again, brand new. We are excited to have that application taken. We get to put our name on the group me. We get to get recognized on the leaderboard for how much we did in our first week as a new writer. Like, we're so excited to have these kind of things done. Or we're looking for that next raise or that next promotion. And we dance the line of just making it out of that house or off of that Zoom without this last part. Quality questions when it comes to locking it down. Here's one of my favorites. Bob and Mary, what did we just do here today? What did we just do? I am going to have my clients repeat back to me what just happened. And guys, you will be amazed at how even after 30 minutes of just talking about it, they don't know what we did. So how, if they don't know what we just did 5 minutes after we did it, how can we expect them to know what we did a year later or 6 months later or 6 years later? There's no way. And we run into it all the time in the home where people think that they have something, but it's absolutely not what they thought they had. So one of my favorite questions to lock it down, what did we just do here today? Now, there's going to be some open-ended questions that comes out of that one, like how much coverage did we put in place for you? What's the monthly payment going to be? How soon can you expect that bank draft to come out? Who did we do this for? How many months of mortgage payments did we just cover? There's a lot of things that can come from that, but what did we just do here today is going to connect the process and have your client tell you what just happened. The other question that I like for the lock it down, how comfortable will this payment be if the water heater goes out or the car needs new tires? How comfortable is this payment going to be, Bob and Mary, if an unforeseen happens? How comfortable is it going to be? So again, what do we just do? How comfortable will this payment be? There's a few things that happen here, guys, because I've had plenty of times in the home where I presented these questions and the answers that I got, I wasn't really comfortable with them. So I used that as a pause to go back in and just re-inspect and reinforce what we just did. Multiple times I've lowered the payment down to the middle option after asking this question because they really thought it through. Because just like with anything that we buy, we can get hyped up in the moment and excited about it, but then we get buyer's remorse. And what buyer's remorse means for us here are chargebacks, and we don't want that. It's not the best thing for any of us or the client. So it's so important in the lock it down to have them repeat back so that they understand, so that 6 hours later or 2 days later when they see that bank draft, they don't forget what they just did, and that they know that they have the freedom and the flexibility right now to go ahead and go a little bit lower if they're most comfortable with that. So let's do a little bit of a quick recap on some of our takeaways. It's going to take emotional labor to go through these questions, guys. It is absolutely necessary. What we get paid for in this business is the emotional labor. If we're in the middle of building a team and still out there producing, let's be mindful of that, because we have to find those places to recharge so that we have the emotional labor, not only for our clients, but for our agents, but for our families. So emotional labor is what it takes for these quality questions. Let's be curious. All along the way, right out of the gate, even with the rapport building, I'm curious about their situation. I'm not curious about necessarily what their favorite sports team is or the kind of things that we traditionally think of with rapport. Rapport just means that they trust and like me, and the best way to get people to trust and like you is to be curious. Last takeaway, we've talked about some W's that are really important. If you haven't already written them down, they're just those standard ones that we learned in school: who, what, when, where, and why. And I love adding how to that, because how is such a powerful, open-ended word to begin a question with. So who, what, when, where, why, and how. We can do that through every phase of the real system, understanding that connection is what it is that people need, and this is the best way, in my opinion, to build that connection. So a little bit of homework for you guys, because I promise this quality questions thing, learning how to ask these in all phases and aspects of our life, this has been some lifelong work for me. I've been thinking and training on this for probably 6 years now, and I'm still not a master at it. My challenge for you is, every time you go to ask a question, whether this is on the phone booking appointments or whether it's in the home today, see if the answer is yes or no. And if it is, instantly change that, ask a follow-up question right behind it that's who, what, when, where, why, or how. I wish everybody luck today building those emotional labor muscles, working out for that. I'm excited for what we're going to find when we're more curious with our team, with our clients, with our families. And I know that quality questions can get us there. So with that, guys, go out there, make it a great day, use that script, and look forward to seeing you guys on some great calls this week. Take care.